Ugh. Well, hello! I'm glad you decided to continue on. I'm glad you're still curious about what I have to say about this movie. And to anyone who just got here because they found this video in specific, welcome. But I would recommend that you watch part 1 first, because I did try to order these in from least significant to most significant, in my opinion. And to those of you who are returning viewers, I have water this time. No dry mouth in the middle of my commentary. And if you're wondering about my outfit right now, I was essentially trying to go for a Gerard Butler and Don Juan triumphant style look, but in all frankness, I do come off more like a kid who's just gonna run outside the backyard going, up and away! So, oh well. Without further ado, let's get started. Top 10, baby. Number 10. The Leroux scribe carriage reference and its enhancement of Journey to the Cemetery. Of all the shoehorned in references to the Leroux novel made in this film, including 25 seconds dedicated to César the horse showing up in the title song, and Raoul falling into a water trap that he immediately escapes from, the best and most well-utilized by far is the reference made to the carriage ride Erik takes Christine on at the end of her fortnight spent in his home. And to be sure about that, here's the film. Hello! And then here's my Barnes & Noble copy of the Leroux novel. I'm going to read the quote to you guys, so you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, obviously. Where it is. He goes, "Toward the end of my captivity, he let me out through the gates that closed the underground passages in the Rue Scribe. Here a carriage awaited us and took us to the Bois. The night we met you was nearly fatal to me, for he is terribly jealous of you, and I had to tell him that you were soon going away." And I actually didn't realize that this might have actually been a reference to the book until much later. Then I went, oh my god, is that why that carriage ride is here? Frankly, it might not be. It could have just been a choice made for the film, but I like to think it is. Again, with all the other attempted references they make in the book, including the horse that just seems to confuse everybody. Shout out to that guy on TikTok who goes, whose horse is that? Anyway, back to the script. Serious mode. Where was I? Oh. Here, it's used to transport Christine to the cemetery where her father's been laid to rest. Following the events of Masquerade, we see Christine in bed at the ballet dormitory, clearly having been up all night, and no doubt thinking of Erik's revelation, another positive we'll address later. Oh. She gets up and walks past Raoul, who has fallen asleep while being positioned at her door all night. She finds her way to the stables and pays a man to take her to the cemetery, hinting at our soon-to-be arrival at wishing you were somehow here again. But while Christine is distracted, the stableman is knocked out, and we can instantly figure out by whom. As if by premonition, the impact causes Raoul to suddenly wake, and he quickly realizes his goof-up when he sees Christine's door open. Yeah, nice job, Raoul. Christine arrives at the awaiting carriage, where only the audience is treated to a hint of her new driver, and she requests, "To my father's grave, please." And to acknowledge it outright, just as an aside, yes, you can hear traces of what would eventually become the score to Beneath the Moonless Sky, as Christine gets ready, which, interestingly enough, ends on the shot of black and red roses she finds waiting for her inside the stable. Subtle, Andrew. As soon as Christine boards the carriage, the gorgeous violin cover of the Phantom of the Opera from the stage show begins, and Raoul, upon learning of her destination from the recovered stable hand, jumps bareback onto a white horse to ride after her, in direct contrast to the black horses pulling Christine's carriage. And as they make their way through the wintry early dawn, there is an overlay recording of Emmy Rossum singing her verse from the title song. And I don't care what you think of her voice, this part is beautiful, easily one of her best moments in the soundtrack. It sounds haunting and reserved, as if she's lost in a reverie, but it becomes heightened when it plays over a shot of Raoul tearing across the foggy fields in the horizon, as if the music has suddenly become diegetic, and he's following after the ghostly echo of her voice as her caravan disappears farther into the distance. To me, This is a fantastic blending of book reference with a musical story structure, while also managing to elevate what was previously established on stage. And for those of you who have been here since the beginning, you may be starting to notice that seems to be a common theme in a lot of my points. Aspects of the stage show getting successfully elevated by the increased accessibility provided by the film. Number 9. Erik's gloves and their story effects. A small thing, but I like Erik's black leather gloves that he wears in this movie, which is funny because I actually watched a newer 04 movie review from back in the summer called Phantom of the Flappera, and the creator, MX Rosebud, straight up says, "I hate his gloves." But anyway, trivial enjoyment out of the way first, they complete Erik's look, but only because they didn't give Butler the hat in this movie. If he'd worn the black fedora like he does on stage, I admit it would have been a bit much, but that doesn't mean I don't still notice their absence in the 25th anniversary broadcast. And frankly, I appreciate the two mediums giving us both looks, one with hat, one with gloves. I also think the gloves make the notable pre-title song hand touch scene look cooler, further establishing both their opposite color palettes and the intersection of their different dimensions at this portal, so to speak. More on this later. Or should I say, liminal space? Reference to another video I watched. Originally, the explanation stopped there, but I've recently come to realize the small part they actually play within the story. When Erik first comes to collect Christine, he's obviously wearing the gloves, and he continues to wear them throughout Music of the Night. However, the next morning, after Christine awakes and spots him during I Remember, you can see that he's not wearing them, but they're back on when he's seen infiltrating Il Muto later. This, to me, points out two things. One, the gloves are merely an accessory. Unlike, say, my man V, some over there, back there, you can see him. He doesn't actually need them to mask anything. His hands are perfectly fine. But given how one of the sightings of the Phantom in Leroux's novel is described as a, quote, a gentleman in evening dress, and Lloyd Webber's Phantom clearly takes off of that, Butler's Erik undoubtedly wears the gloves as part of that look, which then works in tandem with his abduction and subsequent seduction of Christine. But once he's settled comfortably at home and simply working at his organ, his silhouette is far looser, and all excuses to show off his attractiveness aside, it hints at how he plays up his reputation by dressing up accordingly to the patrons' perceptions of him. But once he's alone, he doesn't care as much. In the stage show, but not in the 25th anniversary broadcast, he does tend to wear Persian robes during this scene. Number 2, Erik wearing the gloves when he comes to collect Christine, but specifically during Music of the Night, shows him setting a boundary between the two. In spite of the way he's seen touching her by the end of the song, he isn't actually having direct physical contact with her, no skin to skin. It could be a sign of respect he's trying to show towards her, that despite the situation he still wants to acknowledge that his desires aren't yet hers. Or it could just perhaps be that he still feels that separation of unworthiness, in spite of the confidence he portrays in Music of the Night, which I think makes sense given Butler's inserts of boyish excitement I already described earlier in this list. Not to mention the curtain he puts between his gaze and the sleeping Christine after he places her on the peacock bed. However, once Don Juan Triumphant rolls round, if you notice, he is not wearing the gloves with his costume, hence why I'm not wearing any right now. The point of no return, especially, is without pretense or poetry, with Erik now laying bare his desires for not only Christine, but for the whole world to see. Only in Schumacher's movie, due to the deliberate absence of his gloves, such vulnerability gets to be both figurative and literal, which self, of course, is ironic given the sexual confidence Erik aims to portray through Don Juan. But even Erik himself acknowledges that this character and show is only a front, a top layer that doesn't convey the full depth of his feelings for Christine, as seen by his "All I've Asked of You" interjection. His "Lead me, save me from my solitude" switch up is still such an oof moment for me. Like, damn, dude. Now imagine how much more impactful this would have been had Butler been given the hood like he's meant to have in the stage show and his hands were the only part exposed after being covered throughout the film. Because he even wore them when he dismantled the chandelier. Oh well, missed opportunity to TBH. Water break. Ugh, so much better. Okay. Number 8. Erik's early reveal in All I Ask of You actually kind of works in a way. For me, at least. Another controversial preference. I know. I've watched Lindsay Ellis's review. But allow me to explain. No, I don't think this scene is perfect. Like, for example, having Erik be revealed so early does ruin that initial mystery of whether or not Christine actually hears his voice echo her name after Raoul does, especially when compared to the Apollo's Lyre scene in Leroux's novel. Alright, time to break out this baby again. Give me a minute, I didn't mark the page. Oh. And she gave a sigh, to which it seemed to her that another sigh, behind her, replied, "Didn't you hear?" Her teeth chattered. "No," said Raoul. "I heard nothing. It is too terrible to always be trembling like this." Skip around. "Oh, there is someone in pain," said Raoul. "Perhaps someone has been hurt. Did you hear?" "I cannot say," Christine confessed. "Even when he is not there, my ears are full of his sighs. Still, if you heard... ... And yeah, we all know he's actually there, but they don't know that. Alright, back to the script. Where was I? Oh. Plus, I believe it was the Phantom reviewer who said it best, asking why the Phantom was, quote, hiding behind a horse's ass. But having watched the movie first, there's something about the choice to show Erik's reactions through All I Ask of You that always stood out to me more than saving his reveal for the very end. Firstly, it provides the opportunity for Butler to show off some fantastic subtle facial acting. When he's initially shown in hiding, he appears anxious and uncertain, knowing Christine is mere feet away from discovering him, as well as feeling undoubtedly stunned by her words. And then there's a second shot of him essentially doing that same thing. When the song begins, the first cut to Erik is only made when Christine starts to sing, specifically during the line, "Say you need me with you now and always," in which Erik's black form slips out from behind the statue, his face appearing stunned. Like it didn't matter to him much when Raoul was singing, because this boy that he already knows has been making moves on Christine is naturally going to want to start making declarations to her. But only when he hears Christine start to believe and engage with his words that it all of a sudden hits him. Christine may actually like this guy. We don't cut to him again until Christine's next verse, when she sings, "And you, always beside me, to hold me and to hide me." And the best way I can describe Erik's face in this scene is dejected solemnity. Solemnity. You know, maybe I should learn how to pronounce big words before I put them in my script, because I think I'm trying to sound creative. When Raoul bursts into the chorus and then proceeds to wrap Christine in his arms, there's a cut to where the camera is suddenly filming them from behind Erik's statue. The couple is positioned in the background, while Erik slowly turns to face their affections head-on from the foreground. His turn being so dramatically slow, you can see the perfect split in his face as he transitions from his masked half being in view to his normal half. A bit that always stood out to me in the scene for some reason. And it's interesting to note how Christine and Raoul are posed similarly to how Christine and Erik were during Music of the Night. Only Christine stands in front of Raoul against the left side of his body, and with Erik she is against his right side. Since we're on the subject, could this perhaps be a subtle reflection of the opposing relationships she gets out of both Raoul and Erik? Of the two separate offers they wish to bring into her life? How Music of the Night was about darkness and freedom, whereas All I Ask of You is about light and security? And when posed against Erik, his touch is meant to excite her, whereas Raoul looks as if he's simultaneously hugging her, proving to her the comfort he promises. Nudge, nudge. Anyway, when Christine and Raoul have their big climactic kiss following "Love me, that's all I ask of you," we cut to Erik turning his back on them once more, looking sick with heartbreak. It's the last we see of him until the song finishes and Christine and Raoul have exited the roof. And it's this reaction to their kiss that caps off my reasoning for why I like this change. I like getting to see the full consequence of Erik choosing to follow Christine after killing Bouquet. Like the chaos he caused doesn't even matter to him at this point. Making sure the Vicomte doesn't try anything with Christine is still his top priority. And almost as punishment for this mindset, he's forced to hear the entirety of the romantic duet lest he risk oh my god, why did I write this? Lest he risk exposure. Suffering in silence as the reality of their relationship becomes known to him. And as bonus, I love the choice to have him suddenly walk into frame from the background, closing up the space while the camera remains focused on the fallen rose that Christine dropped as the first notes of All I Ask of You began, until he carefully picks up said rose and the camera pans up to his face. In spite of the audience seeing him at several points during the song already, I think this still manages to add tension and build up to the full range of heartache and emotions he'll express in All I Ask of You reprise. But that's just me. Number 7. Paralleling Raoul and Erik as they enter/re-enter Christine's life. Speaking of Raoul and Erik being presented as opposites, it wasn't until starting this project that I realized the significance of altering Raoul's official emergence into Christine's life so that it better mirrors Erik's. And using a literal mirror, too! Who knew? The managers catch Raoul on his way to see Christine, insisting that perhaps we could present her to you, dear Vicomte. But he insists on making the visit alone, and even swipes a bouquet Andre was holding to give to Christine himself. Keep in mind how lit everything is, the atmosphere electric, and animated with post-show revelers, to the point that they nearly flood into the dressing room after Christine, forcing Madame Giry to verbally push them out, with her "no, no," or whatever accent she thought she was doing. Oh. Once Giry exits during Raoul's talk with the managers, Raoul makes his move, but it is shot from the perspective of being inside the doorway to Christine's dressing room, so we end up watching him greet Christine through the reflection of her mirror. And as he does this, we get another reflection shot of Christine contemplating the rose Giry gave her, and we see her face suddenly change as she recognizes Raoul's voice, before turning towards him and smiling wildly. And although he holds the flowers as he strides further into the room, he ends up just setting them down instead of handing them to her. Anyway, the two of them perform, or rather, discuss, Little Lottie, and then Raoul suggests Christine come to supper with him, no doubt to both celebrate and catch up. She tries to refuse, he won't listen, yada yada, let's skip forward. There's a bit of a weird time discrepancy here because when we cut, suddenly the opera house has gone quiet, the gaslights of the theater being turned down and Christine putting on her nightgown. So you're left questioning how long Raoul's really gone for, but anyway, once everything has gone dark, that's when Erik, as the angel of music, makes himself known. Sorry. He openly and fiercely disapproves of Raoul's attempts to woo her. Christine apologizes for her weakness and implores him to show himself to her. Placating her request, his image then slowly materializes within the glass, surrounded by mist and shadow. Or, as stupid captions put it, okay, I'll go with you, but only because my room is filling up with dry ice. I'm sorry. It's funny. I understand the movie made more of an effort to play up the duality of Christine's two suitors, and that attempt feels especially blatant here. They both appear through her mirror, though Raoul's being figurative and Erik's being literal. Raoul is free to see her as he pleases, when the opera house is active and alive, and doesn't mind letting it hint to others that they have a past. Erik does not have this luxury, only able to appear to her once the entire house has virtually gone dark, and for the meantime, can only stand firm on his connection to Christine when they're alone. And yet, once each instance, English, of Raoul and Erik publicly establishing their relationships to Christine occurs, it's very quickly used against them. The managers start to assume during Prima Donna that surely Raoul and Christine must have slept together the night before. You know, with the diva, diva, happy to relieve a chorus girl who's gone and slept with the patron. Raoul and the soubrette entwined in love's duet, although he made her, he must have been with her. You never get away with all this in a play, but if it's loudly sung and in a foreign tongue, it's just the sort of story audiences adore. That whole little rhyming bit they do, which you can't really catch unless you have the subtitles on. Anyway. And then with Erik, Christine becomes the bait to stop him. Their showing up also occurs in such a way that disrupts her from thinking of the other man. Raoul appears at her door as Christine is contemplating the single red rose with a black ribbon brought to her by Madame Giry, and Erik shows up in time to stop her from considering going out with Raoul. And speaking of flowers, I feel like this might have been a more subtler aspect of the film's Team Erik agenda, where Erik arranges for, and clearly trusts, Madame Giry to deliver his signature flower and congratulatory message to Christine, which she does, hinting at the significance of their own relation, while Raoul can only steal flowers from someone else to bring to Christine, but then doesn't even give them to her, so it comes off more as an empty gesture on his part. Remember, this movie was more or less the vehicle to convince Andrew Lloyd Webber to make Love Never Dies, so the fingerprints are all over it. Number 6. Meg and Christine seeing Erik during Il Muto provides subtle significance in their differing reactions to him. This is the last one from Il Muto, I promise. A smaller, yet no less significant bit that always stuck out at me in this performance is the way Meg and Christine both react upon seeing Erik on the ceiling balcony. Again, I don't know opera house construction, so that's what I was at. Just like ceiling balcony? I don't know. Meg does her classic, "He's here, the Phantom of the Opera," although instead spoken for some reason, so it does lose some of its dramatic edge here, while Christine, seemingly in both shock and marvel, murmurs, "It's him." To me, by having Erik be in plain sight when the two girls express their reactions to him, coupled with the difference in word choice, communicates so much while doing little, especially on Christine's end. Meg, of course, acknowledges this figure as the fabled phantom, a belief she already explicitly communicated to Christine, and only Christine, during their Hannibal rehearsal. But for Christine, it's the first step in her understanding the full extent of Erik's multi-layered identity, that in him, her angel music and the opera ghost are one. And as such, I need to explain my theory on how she comes to realize that in this film. During The Mirror, she calls out to, and believes she is following, her angel music. But once Erik's so-called spell over her takes full effect, she forgets this. Notice how in I Remember, she only talks about 4 things: swirling mist, a lake, a boat, and a man, all of which occur only after she crosses the mirror threshold. And when she sees Erik at his organ, she never once considers if he is in fact her angel, only wondering what face lies behind his mask. So if we read between the lines, we can assume that she's at least temporarily forgotten communing with the voice of her angel the night before. And such fragmented memory loss could certainly be part of the reason why Madame Giry and Meg Giry say she needs her rest and she shouldn't see anyone during notes. Here's a note. Here, I have a note. In the original screenplay, Madame Giry was even going to encounter an out-of-it Christine being delivered back home by Erik. So, there's that. So when Il Muto rolls around and Christine sees him again for the first time since that night, it's her saying, "It's him." It's her recognizing him as the masked man whose home she woke up in, and the only dots she connects are between him and the opera ghost, no doubt spurred on by Meg's conviction. And thus, it provides an additional power to her words, because aside from Madame Giry, she's the only one to see the opera ghost in full guise and have an existing personal connection to him. Compare it to, V for Vendetta, again, yes, I'm mentioning him again, How when V makes his appearance on TV, we can see it in Evie's face that she undoubtedly recognizes him, and in a way more personal than to everyone else, so adds subconscious weight to her viewing of his speech. And to anyone who's watching this going, I've never watched V for Vendetta, you're missing out. Watch that movie. Highly recommended. You heard it first here. Anyway, Christine only knowing him as the Phantom is then further established by "Why have you brought me here, Raoul? I've been there," in which she is pretty much convinced by this point that the opera ghost is in fact real, whisks her away to his underground home, and implores Raoul to believe in him too so she can feel safe. And although she describes the unearthly quality of his voice and the effect it had on her, she does not mention, nor think of, her angel at all. Her focus is on what's real and known to her at that moment. It's not until several months later at the masquerade that Christine sees the whole truth, when Erik declares himself her teacher, and you can see it in her eyes as she finally gets it. Seemingly enchanted by the notion at first, but looking as if it kept her up all night later. And yes, admittedly, this theory does work best within the confines of the changes made inside the film, because without Christine getting to actually see him during El Muto, the realization doesn't feel nearly as pivotal. Not to me, at least. Alright, number 5. Erik and Christine's warm, unspoken communication during the point of no return. Hence this outfit. Yes, Erik should have worn the hood like he does in the show, and the fact that he doesn't is one of the movie's more blatant attempts at sexing up the Phantom. Though interestingly enough, it was actually in the original screenplay. So, I do wonder why they decided to change it. Aside from, oh no, we can't cover up Gerard Butler's pretty face. Oh no, not our main selling point. Whatever, guys. Like, I think he's attractive too, but that's not the point. However, I do think it contributes to one major positive: the fantastic interactions between Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum, mostly through facial acting, but also at points where the lyrics for Point of No Return become almost metatextual. The latter of which actually starts when Erik first walks out on stage. He sings, "Go away for the trap, it is set, and waits for its prey." Sorry, I gotta do complete with the vampire thing he had going on in that show. Which, if you know why he's in this movie, not surprising. Wink, wink. Alright. I stopped losing my place. Oh. And as he does, he gazes at an in-position Christine, who has yet to see him, with intrigue. Yes, it is lustful, but I think there is also an element of quiet surprise to it, like he didn't entirely expect her to go through with this. As he makes his way around the circle of fluttering paper flames, a set addition that only really works in this one moment, he does come across as a predator stealthily approaching its prey. Try not to think too hard about that line. Christine, recognizing his voice, slowly turns around, and when he sings "Silent," he puts his fingers to his lips, using the opportunity to signal her not to alert anyone to his presence, even though everyone else should be recognizing him too, save for Madame Giry, but I digress. As it continues to sing, Christine closes her eyes and her chest sucks in, appearing to lose herself in his voice, perhaps with the added buffer of it being a performance, and due to Raoul's expression at this, she could be noticeably reacting in a way that is far more intimate than when acting alongside Bianchi. Then, when Erik challenges her with, "Now you are here with me! No second thoughts! You've decided," complete with dramatic cape flip, "decided." Oh, sorry, that was fun. That was fun. Christine, quite literally... Oh, now that's in my way. Ow. Christine, quite literally, rises to the occasion, rising steadily to her feet with a look of mischievous intrigue, as if she's thinking, oh yeah, shit just got interesting. He goes on with his verse, and she continues to look somewhat into it, until she appears to remember herself and moves away from him as he finishes. As he sings, "Beyond the point of no return." It's like he's now testing her, the look on his face seeming to say, Decide now, Christine. It's your verse. Christine turns away from him, seemingly contemplating what to do, before glancing up at Raoul, no doubt for comfort, as she begins her verse. There even appears to be a moment where Raoul receives a subtle signal from her to get the gunman ready, like he knows before we do that she's going to go through with getting the Phantom into position. Maybe, I don't know. When she sings, I have come here, hardly knowing the reason why. Her facial acting makes it seem like she's talking about the performance itself, not entirely knowing why she complied to this plan, before Rossum's eyes literally roll back at, in my mind I've already imagined our bodies entwining, defenseless and silent. Like perhaps that idea excited her a bit. Then she turns back to Erik with, I am here with you, face to face with him once more and letting her straps fall, conveying a newfound sultriness to her performance. One that Erik clearly wasn't expecting, because as soon as she sings, I've decided, there crosses a look of awe and wonderment in his eyes at the power and control she's now exhibiting, which you can primarily see physically when his lips part and forehead wrinkles. It is at this point that he follows her lead, where they walk up their respective spiral staircases that meet as one in the middle, but almost never taking their eyes off each other. It's a non-the-nose visual to be sure, but I like it. Christine continues to pour her commitment out into the song, and it is now Erik held captive in her thrall, with Raoul more or less forgotten about at this point. As they reach the landing, there is absolute confidence and conviction in her posture, ready to face Erik and her desires head on, and as a result, her voice has this absolute powerhouse moment with Consume us, which I'm pleased to see a subset of fans still collectively obsessed about on Twitter. Erik himself has regained his confidence by this point, and they stride towards each other for the final duet portion of the song. As they sing, past the point of no return, together, there is a strength and a will to both their voices as they harmonize, having both previously succumbed to each other's words, but now together embracing, both physically and vocally, the very essence of the song itself, in a location separate and high above the prying eyes and judgments of the rest of the world. Hello, future beneath the moon the sky implications. And that's essentially where the performance ends, because soon after, Erik breaks character. Although I agree with Lindsay Ellis's notion that the scene is far too cluttered with sets and the, as she put it, Dread Pirate Roberts and the Tango Dancers for a song centered around an intimate power play, there are often times I almost forget all that extra crowding because of the genuine intimacy and subtle communication displayed by Gerard and Emmy. Repeat. Almost. Save for those occasional cuts that insist on reminding you they're all there. And I much prefer the choice to have Christine know that it's him right away, and we as the audience get to witness that internal decision-making she has over the course of the song, from uncertainty to authority, even it does come at the cost of making everyone else look stupid. And in my eyes, having that last verse be performed as a culmination of the sensuality and foreplay each exerted by Erik and Christine is a far more suitable and satisfying conclusion to this song, as opposed to Erik breaking character too early by dragging Christine closer towards the wings. Because dare I say, watching them start out intimate in the stage show, but then have it be cut so short and essentially lead nowhere by the end is like musical blue balls. LMAO. Water break. Number 4. Raoul's absence from Wandering Child. Wandering Child works so much better as just a duet between Erik and Christine. The movie made a strong choice in cutting Raoul's section from the song and keeping him until the end, on the very end. There, I said it. Let me explain why. Number 1. Biased reasoning. Let's get that out of the way. It provides opportunity for Gerard Butler and Emmy Rossum to display more beautiful, uninterrupted harmonization. Fight me. Number 2. Given the rousing emotional nature of its instrumentation, what with Erik trying to reach through Christine's grief and inspire her to believe in him once more, Such effort again feels uninterrupted without Raoul's insertions breaking the tension and focus of the scene. Number 3. Speaking of breaking focus, the stage show features about 4 different sequences where multiple characters have individual verses overlaid on top of one another, oftentimes to the point you have to strain your ear to focus on what each person is singing. Oh, I forgot a comma here. On what each person is singing, otherwise, you really only get snippets. So having it occur multiple times can get pretty tedious after a while. As I said before, this is a credit to the movie's favor, as that is much easier to do here than in the show. It seems purposeful in notes 1 and 2, as it represents the chaos and confusion caused by Erik's demands. For Erik, Christine, and Raoul, it gives them an overlaid vocal trio and final layer. I read that wrong, but giving them an overlaid vocal trio and final layer feels like a proper culmination of their disorderly love triangle. And I'd even say having them overlay any time before this point actively takes away from that impact. I can speak, I promise. Saving Raoul until the end oh my god! Number 4. Saving Raoul until the end actually has some thematic relevance. During the mirror, the movie makes a point of showing Raoul at Christine's door. And instead of just having his, "Whose is that voice? Who is that in there?" Ow, it's scratching my neck. "Whose is that voice? Who is that in there?" lines from the show, he actively struggles to open the door and calls out Christine's name in vain, while Erik effortlessly beckons her to him. I can read. I can read my own script, I promise. Jesus. Obviously, this is meant to show how lost within Erik's power Christine is right then, to the point that she can't even hear Raoul at her door, maybe 5.5 feet away from her, judging by the layout of her dressing room. However, when Erik attempts this maneuver again in the cemetery, and Christine starts going to him, as soon as Raoul is within earshot of her, Christine immediately turns around and addresses him with surprise, the spell broken. This, to me, perfectly represents the dwindlement of Erik's power over her. Wandering Child is obviously meant to be his last-ditch effort to bring Christine back to him, and by having Raoul's sudden appearance break that burgeoning union almost immediately, it shows how much stronger Christine's bond with Raoul has become by this point, with theirs being built on sincerity rather than duplicity. That which almost pained me to write, as an Erosine fan, given that part of the reason why I started shipping them was because I felt their bond ran deeper. But we're talking about story-wise here, not preference-wise. Number 3. Erik reveals he's Christine's teacher at the masquerade. Finally, we made it here. So, I have mixed feelings on the movie's choice to combine Erik's Notes 2 dialogue with his infiltration of the masquerade as Red Death. Or this movie's attempt at Red Death. On the one hand, having Erik follow up his "Don Juan triumphant" declaration with him just greeting everyone again with "fondest greetings to you all" does come off a little clunky. But on the other hand, not having it in the stage show makes his confrontation end quite abruptly, with this awkwardly long pause following his insistence that the managers comply before erupting at Christine with "Your chains are still mine, you will sing for me," and then freaking everyone out with fire. So ultimately, I err on the side of preferring it. But the best part about it by far is the public display of Erik's revelation that he is Christine's teacher, which does not feature the same emotional punch when watched in the show. After presenting Don Juan, Erik goes about insulting his naysayers, saying Carlotta should learn how to act, Bianchi needs to lose weight, and the managers don't yet know their place. All while toying with them by pointing his sword dangerously close at each person he addresses. But the moment he turns towards and mentions Christine, he puts the sword away, his voice a bit softer, and Christine looks up at him nervously. He observes how she'll undoubtedly do her best, facing the crowd as he does so, before building himself up to, "If pride will let her return to me," holding his arms up in gesture to himself. "Her teacher," looks into the audience. "Her teacher," looks at Christine. I love how Butler delivers this line. the emotional depth now added to his repetition of teacher especially. He suddenly goes from relishing in the revelation he's about to drop to absorbing the weight of his own words, knowing the truth has been released. The first teacher is for the partygoers, delivered with boastful pride, whereas the second teacher is for Christine, suddenly vulnerable. As for Christine, wonderment appears over her face as she takes in his words, and even Erik can't seem to believe that she knows now, though he could also be trying to gauge her reaction, thinking to himself, well, she doesn't look necessarily mad about it. Could there still be hope for us, maybe? There's even a cut to Madame Giry appearing solemn and unsurprised at this notion compared to Meg behind her. It is at this point that Erik and Christine continue to stare at each other with their mouths open, clearly speechless, but then it's as if their bodies unconsciously know how to respond for them. Christine begins moving towards him, almost with the same fluidity as to when she was hypnotized, and he starts descending the remaining steps to meet her halfway, but without the tempo and dominance displayed during his initial entrance. By this point, Raoul has, unwisely, left Christine's side to obtain his sword, and it soon cuts to him arriving back at the ballroom and reacting to their now close proximity. Interestingly enough, it's directly after this cut, the mood between Christine and Erik is suddenly broken, when Erik's eyes drift away from hers and land on the engagement ring around Christine's neck, and he snatches it, declaring, "Your chains are still mine! You belong to me!" The action then startling Christine out of her reverie. By giving Erik and Christine this add moment at the masquerade, only to have it broken by a symbol of her commitment to Raoul, it almost feels like foreshadowing to what will transpire in Wandering Child. Essentially, the ultimate display of how far removed Christine is from Erik's influence by this point due to her love for Raoul, which I'm sure Erik probably thinks about when he jumps down from the mausoleum with his sword drawn, ready to fight like, "Damn you, Vicomte! Stop killing the mood!" LOL. God, this thing. The Velcro is scratching my neck. Number 2. But first, water. Ooh. Thank God I remember the water this time. Number 2. The recurring usage/motif of the red rose with black ribbon. I adore this element of the film. So much so that it's my YouTube handle. It's become so synonymous with both the iconography of the show itself and Erik and Christine's relationship, as well as highlighting its Beauty and the Beast illusions, that I'm surprised it's never been incorporated on stage, at least from what I've seen. There's always been a rose involved with the mask on posters for POTO, but it's never actually played much of a role except here. The black-ribboned rose, of course, is a symbol of Erik's love and admiration to Christine, and at other times, a hint to his impending or unseen presence. It first appears following Christine's successful Hannibal performance courtesy of Madame Giry, and the camera makes a point of highlighting its importance by zooming in on it as Christine runs her fingers over the ribbon, to the point that I swear you can almost feel its smooth fabric while you're watching. In the background, a haunting fade-out of angel music plays on what I think is a medallion. I already discussed how Raoul disrupts her while contemplating the flower, and the next time we see it isn't until when Meg steps through the mirror to investigate, and the camera pans down to it, forgotten on the floor, besides the entrance, hinting at what the audience knows and what Meg doesn't, that Erik is the culprit. This same flower reappears again during Il Muto, with Christine picking it up during her fitting for the Countess costume and looking at it with concerned recognition, like maybe it's what starts triggering more memories in her from the night before. Madame Giry, meanwhile, seems to look at it unfazed. It also works as a neat bit of foreshadowing to the chaos Erik is about to unleash with his impending killing of Bouquet. When Christine brings Raoul up to the rooftop with her, we end up seeing that she's brought the rose with her. Initially, I thought it was a continuity error and that it seemed to come from nowhere, but upon watching Why Have You Brought Me Here, there are in fact a couple of moments when I can see it in her hand as they're climbing the levels, like it's at her side when she's going across the balcony railing, when she goes... Which part is that? When she goes, "I can't escape from him, I never will." That bit. Anyway, Anyway, when she describes to Raoul the details of Erik's lair, she appears to unconsciously clutch the rose for comfort. As she finishes detailing the horror of Erik's face, she pauses and looks down at the rose before launching into the beauty of his voice. Again, the rose seems to act as a sort of memory trigger for Christine. She then brings the rose closer to her as she describes the sadness she saw within Erik's eyes. And it's actually the rose that gives us the big emotional starting points to both versions of All I Ask of You. Raoul and Christine's duet. The rose slips from her hand as Raoul leads her from the shadows, and we get that epic end shot from the trailer of it landing forlorn in the snow, to which then you just have that Mean Girls moment of, ah! Erik's reprisal. The camera focuses on the rose as Christine's voice fades away, now the ultimate symbol of her rejecting Erik's darkness in favor of Raoul's light. And initially, he seems to sing right at the rose after picking it up, as if responding directly to her rejection. He then proceeds to use it as a tissue before crushing it in his hands, the petals scattering as it culminates in his desire for revenge. Roses don't feature again until Christine's decision to go to her father's grave, and she catches a bouquet of black and red roses already waiting for her inside the stable. And although she visibly frowns at this discovery, it also doesn't seem to deter her, as she just ends up taking them with her. The shot of roses that is then followed up by the original driver getting knocked out. So again, another foreshadow to Erik's impending infiltration. In Don Juan Triumphant, Christine has a rose in her hair as part of her costume, and is even seen carrying a basket of red roses as her prop when Amita is introduced on stage. Erik's show, Erik's layout and design. Once more, Christine is holding a rose in her hands and absentmindedly fingering its stem just as Erik is about to make himself known to her as Don Juan. As previously discussed, a rose with a black ribbon appears at the end of the movie on Christine's grave as... Oh, what did I just do? As a sign of Erik's undying love for her. And unless you include the No One Would Listen deleted scene in which Erik once again sings to the rose, that's about it. But yeah, the black ribboned rose is iconic, and there is a reason why so many old POTO tributes and parodies online include a reference to it at one point or another. Well played, Schumacher. Yeah, it's so important to me, actually, by this point, as an association with Phantom. Not just because you can see the couple roses I have up here on my bookshelf, but I love it so much that when I watch the Melbourne show of Love Never Dies, and Christine says to Raoul, "Oh, look at you, Raoul. You look like the handsome boy in the opera box. One who would always toss me a single red rose." I legitimately got pissed. I was like, last I checked, that was Erik's thing. Christine, I think you're getting your boyfriends confused. I mean, there was a bit in the 25th anniversary show where he brings a rose to her, and I was just like, I was just like internally going, no, that's Erik's thing. But still, whatever, Raoul. Try to steal Erik's thunder, why don't you? Like always. Okay, drumroll please. We have finally hit number 1. What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? Number 1. The title song is enacted by hand touch. Y'all just look like, that's it? So this final one is probably the most biased of the bunch, but I can't help it. It's legitimately my favorite scene of the film, and safe to say, probably one of its most iconic. You have your Beauty and the Beast 91 hand touch fans, your Pride and Prejudice 2005 hand touch fans, but this one's always been mine. Both Lindsay Ellis and MX Rosebud have discussed why having the title song start when Erik and Christine touch hands isn't proper filmmaking, because, to quote Lindsay, the editing doesn't match the energy, but I don't care. Well, I mean, I do care. As a film critic, I care, obviously, because this is important to know, but as a fan and defender of this movie, I don't care! I love the decision to start the title song at their hand touch. The song that describes the nature of Erik and Christine's relationship to the audience, and arguably the show's most well-known number, it doesn't begin until they've touched. And if you notice, the first note of the song hovers in anticipation of the contact, as if the organ itself is waiting for the exact right moment to start, signifying the gravity and significance of this new development in their bond. As we can assume, this is the first time Erik and Christine have had physical contact with each other. You also gotta love the contrast of Christine's arm draped in the white lace of her gown, her hand exposed, while Erik's is completely covered in smooth, sleek black. And the way their handhold comes out looking like a perfect fit, because like his hand's like this, and she takes his hand like this, like boop. Love it. But if we look a little deeper, there's actually something to be said for Butler and Rossum's acting choices here. For starters, why does Christine initially hesitate? She's clearly under hypnosis, and in the 25th anniversary show, we see her go straight to Erik and accept his waiting hand, no questions asked. But in the movie, she pauses, and I pondered as to why. She pauses, and I pondered. That's fun to say. Oh, is she just nervous? Is she wondering if she'll ever return? Does she worry about the corporeality of her angel of music? Of whether her hand will actually take his or go through it like a ghost? Or could the presence of Erik's glove have momentarily confused her and made her question his claims? All possible, and all things to certainly consider. As for Erik, the fact that he waits for her here is extremely telling to me. There's no display of impatience or aggravated determination on his end to complete this gesture, and that to me makes the truth of his intentions clear. Despite everything he's done to bring her to this point, co-opting the figurehead of the angel of music so he could talk to her and keep other men away until the time comes when he's ready to more or less indoctrinate her, he wants her to genuinely want him. More specifically, though, to choose him. In this case, he waits for her to choose to go with him to his lair, to place faith in his lead. Albeit she is hypnotized while doing so he is diluting himself here, but I like to think it's just another contributing detail that adds to his redemption at the end of the story, realizing how Christine can't and won't actually choose him if she's being influenced. And as an aside, I can count at least 6 different Greek mythology edits I've seen on YouTube that have used this hand touch scene, 5 of them being for Hades and Persephone, surprise surprise, and 1 to represent Orpheus and Eurydice, which was in fact a surprise. But funny how both myths involve the underworld, and they're all in my Greek, and all of those are in my Greek Mythselaneous playlist if you want to go check it out. I've also seen it used as the background of a musical playlist that was called Dance With Me, the Villain Whispered, and it was just that hand touch scene on a loop. Although I think that got taken down, I don't know. But still, anytime I see it in a video, I'm just like, I just have like a moment. Okay. We have made it to the end, everybody. Ugh. And I didn't lose my voice in the process, so that's nice. But I hope that even if you disagree with me with a lot of these notions, I hope you at least you have a little perspective and you understand that, again, I'm somebody who admits to having watched the movie first, and this being my gateway into my Phantom obsession. And I'm sure right now you're also seeing the sun has since come out during this video, so now everything, it's about as lit in here as Gerard Butler's so-called darkness-stirring lair in the movie. Oh well. I guess that fits. Ironic. But yes, this is my mom's copy, by the way. I love this movie, and it means a lot to me, and it always will. And I really wanted to give it, the love that it deserves, because not everybody does. So I figure, you know what? It's my turn. It's my turn to do it. And I actually have a sort of spin-off to this series where I'm actually going to do a video discussing why I still love Gerard Butler as the Phantom specifically, because of all the things that this movie gets flack for, he's definitely the most hotly debated. And he's also probably the easiest person to go after in terms of going, oh no, he can't sing. Why they hire a man who can't sing to play this genius musician? So yeah, I'm going to give him his own little defense video, which hopefully I'll get out before the end of the year, but we'll see. So, Please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more topics and discussions like this. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the year, or Happy New Year, depending on when I get this up. All right.